guys, I'm Claire. Welcome back. Today I am here to talk to you about a recent release, and that is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. A lot of people seem to be loving this book, and I am here to offer a dissenting opinion. I was extremely disappointed by this book in a number of different ways, and normally I don't want to spend a ton of time dwelling on negativity and books that I didn't like, but I think that with all the praise going around for this book, I wanted to see if there was anyone else out there who felt the same way I did. So this novel follows the Richardson family, an upper middle class family living in Shaker Heights, Ohio. It is America's first planned city, and it's sort of supposed to be this kind of suburban utopia. So this book is about the Richardson family, but it's also about Shaker Heights as a whole and what happens to it when Mia Warren, a bohemian, free-spirited artist, and her young teenage daughter move into the Richardson family's rental home. I want to start with the things that I liked about this book, and one thing I will say about Celeste Ng is that I find her immensely readable. I also think that Celeste Ng is pretty good at dialogue, and she's extremely good at capturing the physicality of her characters and the way that they kind of interact with each other and occupy space. I really felt like while I was reading this book that I was almost watching a movie. Do you ever read books, especially in contemporary fiction, where they're told in a linear way and they're not really doing anything particularly challenging or interesting with the literary form, but instead they're just telling a really good story that you can visualize in your head and that you can easily imagine being adapted for the screen? I think that that can be a positive in that it makes for really entertaining reading, but I also think it can be a limitation. So I think that's a good segue into some of the things that I didn't like about this book. One of those flaws is at the basic writing level, which is that she has a tendency to use these similes that I don't think are very good. It was kind of like hitting a really harsh speed bump while reading where everything is going fine, and then she'll tack this simile onto the end of a sentence. It's just distracting and sort of jolts me out of the reading experience. She says, behind it, a 3-story tan house slowly arose, like a great beast climbing out of the earth. Front loaders and trucks flitted in and out of the scene like ghosts caught unawares. In the last photograph, a bulldozer raised the dirt to even the terrain, flattening the landscape like a popped bubble. She just piles similes on top of each other, and it makes you think that perhaps she's trying to overcompensate for the fact that her writing is fairly straightforward and not particularly lyrical. The other thing that really was an issue in this book is that I find all of her characters to be extremely one-note and one-dimensional. After you learn their main defining character traits, nothing about these characters is surprising in the rest of the book. And I think part of that is because she tries to pull this book in too many different directions. There are so many storylines and subplots going on in a book that's really only about 300 pages long, and nobody gets fully fleshed out in a way that they deserve. And because of that, Celeste Ng does this thing where instead of developing her characters, she will have these flashbacks that aren't woven into the narrative in any way. They're literally just like in a movie, a jump cut to 20 years earlier, where a character's whole personality and the way that they treat other people is explained through a bunch of exposition. It just oversimplifies all of these people and all of their motivations, and it really just spoon feeds these characters and who they are to you. What really tanked this book for me was the way in which all of these multiple competing storylines conclude in the last 100 or so pages of the book. And I would say that Celeste Ng draws some pretty weird conclusions and judgments that I thought were either not fleshed out enough and not explored in enough depth, or in some cases were just straight up weird. So I'm gonna get into some mild plot spoilers. If you want to go into this book completely blind, I would recommend that you see yourself out now and then come back and let me know what you think once you have read this book. So one of the subplots in this book involves a baby that is left at a fire station, and then it is, for all intents and purposes, adopted by this wealthy white family. And then about a year later, the mother, who is a Chinese immigrant, comes back seeking the child that she gave up. Celeste Ng uses this as a vehicle to discuss a little bit the issues and the complexities behind transracial adoption. And basically, the way that she deals with this very difficult subject is addressed and wrapped up in the matter of a couple of pages in a sort of climactic but not very climactic courtroom scene that I just don't think does justice to how complicated this topic is. I think she makes the important point that parents who adopt kids of a different race need to be cognizant of the responsibility they have in raising a child who isn't going to look like their parents. And I think that she introduces how parents in those situations have a responsibility that sometimes they don't treat as thoughtfully or as carefully as they should. But she also kind of presents this idea that biological motherhood trumps all other forms of motherhood or parenthood or family, and that blood ties are this unbreakable bond that can never be matched through adoption or sort of self-chosen or other unconventional forms of family. And it also kind of weirdly implies that, like, for adoptive parents, an adopted child could be swapped out with a different adopted child and it wouldn't make a difference. On a kind of related note, this book talks a little bit about abortion. It's kind of presented as this weight that a woman has to carry for the rest of her life. I don't think this book was anti-abortion, but again, Celeste Ng has some kind of weird ideas about motherhood, and she's really fixated on motherhood and women's like roles as mothers. And then the thing that bothered me the most about this book is that I really don't think like she treated all of these characters fairly. I feel like certain characters were demarcated as villains and other characters were practically canonized as saints. Mrs. Richardson is a character who has a lot of flaws and is super unlikable in a lot of ways, but I found myself almost rooting for her just because Celeste Ng seemed so against her. Likewise, the character of Mia, I think, is supposed to be super likable, but it is so clear that Celeste Ng views her as this person with higher morals and higher principles because she chooses to live unconventionally, and it just really grinded my gears because the character of Mia does some really fucking cruel and selfish things that are never really criticized by Celeste Ng. This book is dedicated to those out on their own paths, setting little fires. Apparently, if you're a rebel and you flout convention, you can do really shitty fucking things but still have the moral high ground over everyone else who lives in a suburb. I don't need all these characters to be equally likable or equally detestable. I just need Celeste Ng to not be telling me who I should be rooting for and who I shouldn't be rooting for. So, I don't know, guys. If you've read the book, let me know what you thought about the characters, if you think that my criticisms are legitimate or if I misread what she was trying to do. Just let me know what you think. I would love to talk about it. That's all I have for you right now, guys. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.